Hi, Mike. We can hear you.
Great, thanks.
So let's start. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Past Computation Element Working Group's first session. So as you can see here, and as you probably noticed on the agenda, we will have a second session on Friday afternoon or Friday, whatever time zone you live in. So we'll try to fill and respect the scheduled agenda. It's tight for both sessions, so we'll try to move on time. Next, please. So you should all be familiar with the usual not well, usual reminder about the IPR rules within the IETF. You should be aware of that when you sign to the medical tool, when you book the IETF attendance, I guess, as well. So if you're unfamiliar with those, please have a look at the references here. Remind that anything you say, share, or follow, discuss within the IETF may be subject to some IETF processes related to the IPR rules. So please follow them. Next. The guidelines are for conduct. We know that since we don't meet face to face, sometimes the relationship between people may be a bit different because we don't see each other. So keep in mind that we are all respectful human beings. We're all expected to respect our colleagues and be kind with them. We may have disagreement at some point, but we are supposed to have impersonal technical discussions. We are here to act as a group to build the internet standards. So make sure that you are following the respectful rule. Otherwise, your chairs may have to act on complex situations. Next, please. So we are online. So as you may be aware of now, there are some rules of conduct to make it convenient for everyone when connected on Miteco. Try to mute yourself all the time on unmute only where when you need to present or when you acknowledge on the queue to raise a question or a comment. You may use your video, knowing that connection for people may be different. You won't necessarily supposed to if you feel it may be complicated for your access link. Headsets are recommended because typically mics are much better when close to the mouth. Miteko under the blue sheet stuff. There's a chat. You may be already using it from time to time. Some Meteco information is at the link that is displayed here. And just still the usual Java chat, which is tunnel to Meteco. So whatever door you're using, you are probably converging. We have Harry acting as a secretary for a session. He's using the notes, new URL notes, ietf.org, the CodeMD tool to take the minutes. If you want to give him a hand, please feel free to connect to the notes ietf.org. The, the better, the more people using it and putting info there, the better the minutes will be at the end. About the session itself, if you want to join a queue, you have the mythical icons to raise your hand. You will be given the floor at your turn. Remember to state your name. There is audio recording in progress. And as usual, since we have tight agendas, try to be mindful of your time and try to include the questions and comments as part of your slot when you're presenting. Thanks. Next, please. As usual, we remind you that there is a mailing list to discuss any topics related to PC working group, and especially progress the work. Please try to be as vocal as possible when we are sending some polls on the mailing list. Working with Blasco, documented options, IPR checks, of course. So make sure that you're catching up with the topic discussed, and please feel free to create new threads if necessary. You don't have to wait for a slot during the meeting to start new work or progress existing works. We have a wiki, which is full of very relevant information. If you feel there are some missing ones, either edit it or send a mail to the chairs and secretary. And don't forget to request early code point allocation if you feel that you have an implementation at stake that may require code point before the document is published as an RFC and has gone through the INR. There is a process for that, and we already have a couple of documents in this case. So keep in mind that it's part of the usual business to make sure that you don't collide or squat code points when you implement specification. Next, please. So the agenda, we have here the agenda for both sessions. If anyone has something to batch, now is the time, especially for today's session. No one's in the queue, so we'll move on. I'll give the floor to Drav for the document status for the PC working group.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. So a quick document status. We have no new RFCs since the last IETF. We have a document in the RFC editor queue. In fact, it's been there for a long time. We did try to unblock it. So a version 13 was posted to strip the blocking part, which was the L2 VPN flow spec from this ID, because that is now dependent on the flow spec v2 work, which is ongoing in IDR. And a separate ID has been created where we have moved the content related to L2 VPN flow spec into a separate ID. So one option that the authors asked was, can this be quickly adopted, since the content was already in a document which had the working group and in fact IETF consensus. So can we do a quick working group adoption call? So this question is still open. If anybody has any comments and thoughts, please join the queue. Otherwise, I am sure Julian will take an action on it, since I'm a co-author. The next document that we have is the binding SID. This is the document with our AD. Our AD gave comments, and I think the authors have updated it and handled the comments. So now it's just waiting for AD to go ahead. John, do you have any comments on this? Otherwise, I'll move on.
No, I don't. Acknowledge that you're waiting on me, so I will get to those soon. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So next, we had an errata. This was an errata based on the RBNF ordering with respect to LSP object and class type object in PC request. This was rejected, and John gave his reasoning clearly on the mailing list. And there was some corresponding discussion as well on the thread on how we can resolve such a problem. There is a new ID proposed on it, and it's on the agenda on the Friday session, where we can discuss this in more detail. We have 3 documents which had asked for early INA code point, and all of these are allocated. Please note the expiry date. So the expectation is that if there is a second call needs to be made for extending, just keep this in mind. Ideally, we would like to, if the document is ready within that timeline, that would be much better. Otherwise, we would need to request an extension. So next, I will quickly go over some of the working group documents, especially the documents where we want to check the status from the authors. These are the documents which are nearing working group last call, which is stateful GMPLS. I think authors have done their job, and they have confirmed that it is ready for working group last call, and I think the chairs will take an action on it next pretty soon. With the second document, so I request authors, if they disagree with what I'm saying and if they have further comments, please join the queue and I will give you the floor. The second document is the enhanced error. We discussed this in the last meeting as well, and chairs have not made a decision on what to do next with it. Just a recap, when we polled for interest on this document, we did not get much interest shown on the list. Some of the options that we were thinking that maybe we can make it experimental, but even if we do that, we would still need more people to review and send comments and confirm that they feel like the document is ready for publication as an experimental document. Another option was that we mark it in our data tracker as waiting for implementation, and let's see if one of the work, like maybe stateful interdomain or some other work, take up this enhanced error mechanism and start using it and implementing it. And at that time, it would be a good idea to maybe publish the two work together. So we are still waiting for decision on this. If anybody has any thoughts, please reach out to chairs at any time. And after this IETF, most probably we'll be making a decision on this pretty soon. Next, we have PCEP Yang. An update was posted on this last month. The comments were there from Tom Patch, and thanks for him for doing a good review and always providing comments with each update. The Yang doctor review on this document is pretty old, so I think one is we can look for a Yang doctor review and even working group last call next. The thing to note on the right hand side is the dependencies. So it is dependent on some documents like IETF TLS client and IETF TLS server, both of them in working group last call in netconf. IETF TE in TEAS is also in the queue for working group last call. So I think PCEP Yang can move and all our dependencies are kind of handled. And this document could also be moved to working group last call and Yang doctor review, etc. pretty soon. I wanted to highlight about native IP. We posted it on the IDR list that we are looking for feedback, since this is related to BGP session establishment via PCEP. We have also, authors have asked for agenda time in the IDR. So in tomorrow's session on Thursday, they will be discussing, and we hope to get some early feedback from the IDR on this. And whenever we do the working group last call on this document, I will make sure that we cross-post it in the both working group so that there are no late surprises when it moves out of the working group. With FlexGrid, there hasn't been a change for a pretty long time, but authors want to give a chance. Do you think the document is ready? Is there any open issues with it? If they have any information that they want to pass on, this is a good time to do that. Otherwise, I'll move on. But the wiki is there. You can always update and keep the working group in loop with your working group document status. These two documents are SR, the document related to SRv6. Again, this has been pretty stable. In my reading, this might be nearing working group last call status. If authors have any update on this, please let us know. I don't see anyone coming in. I will give me a second. No. The next one, we have VN Association. In this, authors have confirmed that this is ready, so we will take an action on it accordingly. The two SR path segment and SR bidirectional document, these have been updated, but not too much of technical changes, mainly sync up with published documents. I don't see any open issues on these documents. So hopefully these documents are also nearing working group last calls. If any of the authors want to say something, please go ahead. Otherwise, this is the status as for working group. this document, the candidate path SR policy document, it's on the agenda. So we will discuss this next anyways. With respect to local protection enforcement, there was an update, no significant change. There is an INA allocation for this. And I think if the document is ready and there is nothing pending, I think I request authors to prepare and ask for working group last call accordingly. Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Andrew. Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that it's basically just been kind of sitting in a steady state. So if anybody has any concerns or comments, definitely I'm all ears. Otherwise, I mean, it's there. It's pretty straightforward. There's 2 implementations. So whenever the working group feels that it's ready, I'm good to proceed further with it. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. We have a PCCCSR. There was an update, and they have done the alignment with the published RFC 9050. So thanks for that. For stateful interdomain, we did not have an update this time. For extended flags, a new version has been posted, and the comments that were received during the adoption call are handled. So thank you for that again. Let's keep our documents up to date and handle comments as and when we get them. Multipath is on the agenda. The state sync was updated, and again, the comments that were received during the adoption call were handled. So thanks, authors, for that. And finally, this is our recent adopted working group document on optional objects. The authors have posted an update and have handled comments during the working group adoption. So thanks again for that. And finally, this is our working group adoption poll queue. There is an ongoing call for SRP2MP policy. And our plan is to do a reshuffling of our queue. So after IETF 112, we will reshuffle our adoption queue based on the feedback that we get. So if you have any comments, please reach out to our chairs during this time, and we will be publishing the updated poll queue on our wiki. That's it. If anybody has any comments on the working group documents, please use this time. Otherwise, we'll move to the main agenda. Seeing no one, off to you, Mike.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Michael. I'm from Cisco Systems, presenting PCEP extensions for signaling multipath information on behalf of my co-authors. Next page, please. So just to give a quick review of what this draft is, high level about, is that if you have the PCE compute something, that it allows you to return multiple paths for that computation. So basically, and we keep this independent of any data plane or applications such as SR policy or CPTE. And we also make the extensions applicable to stateful and stateless PCEP. So it works just as well with PC request and PC reply. So for example, if you want to send just a PC request with requesting a path, you can use all these extensions just as well. Next slide, please. So basically, without this draft, PC can only return either 0 or 1 forward paths in response to a computation request. So this was sufficient for RSVPT tunnels because they always follow, each hop is one link. Then with SR policy, we required that there could be multiple forward paths for a certain candidate path. And so SR policy has this concept of segment lists under each candidate path. And so the traffic towards each candidate path is spread out among the different segment lists. And so this draft was originally motivated by this application of multiple segment lists. But again, as I said, we keep it completely agnostic of any application. So it's not limited to SR policy. And then with the latest set of updates to this draft, we allow not only multiple forward paths, but we allow multiple reverse paths to be returned. And there's a kind of a detailed mapping from each forward path to a set of reverse paths, and from each reverse path to a set of forward paths that I will examine in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So we just defined this TLV called opposite direction path TLV. And this TLV goes into the path attributes object, and it specifies the one of the reverse paths or one of the opposite direction paths to the path that to the path of the current path attribute object. So basically there could be multiple copies of or multiple instances of this TLV in each path attributes object, because there could be multiple reverse paths for a given forward path. And it's also not necessarily true that if path 1 is the opposite of path 2, it is not necessarily true that path 2 is the opposite of path 1. So basically this oppositeness property is not mutual, and I'll give an example of that later. Next slide, please. So here we'll go through an example of circuit style SR policies. So circuit style SR policies are basically kind of two policies from opposite head ends or opposite routers, and the paths of these policies are very tightly coupled. So each router, when it sends traffic in the forward direction, it knows that the reverse traffic will come back on the same set of links in the reverse direction. And basically, what we want to do is we want each of the routers. So, for example, in this picture here, there's H1 and E1, which are like the PE routers that have SR policies. So there's basically an SR policy going from H1 to E1, and the reverse SR policy going from E1 to H1. So we can see that in the data model section here. Each SR policy has two candidate paths, and each candidate path has two segment lists. So if we look at the blue segment list, for example, on the left, on router H1, this segment list goes H1, M1, M2, E2. And there's a corresponding reverse segment list, blue, on the right, on router E1. That is just the reverse of that segment list. So it will be, it starts at E1, then goes to M2, then M1 and H1. So these two segment lists are, they would be, for example, like adjacency labels that are just reversed. And the goal is that each of the policy head ends must know the forward path, obviously, but also it must know the reverse path that corresponds to each forward path. And so we see that in the PSAP signaling section, basically, there's, if you look at, for example, the blue ERO, if you just use that as a guide, you'll see that the path attributes of that blue ERO have path ID 1 and opposite path ID 3. And then if you look at the second instance on the left of the blue ERO, you'll see that it has path ID 3 and opposite path ID 1. So it means that basically the second instance of the blue ERO is actually a reverse ERO. And it has this R flag set to 1, which means that it's basically not to be installed into forwarding, but it's just for informational purposes. And so the same thing repeats for the yellow ERO. So it's quite a bit of information to kind of to analyze. But if you just follow the colors, I think it kind of makes sense. And for example, there's like a purple ERO in the second candidate path that does not have a reverse. And basically that's also encoded because it has the opposite path ID of 0. All right. Cheng has a question. I'm not sure if I should answer it. If I can answer it now if you want.
Like Tony from Huawei. Then I didn't have time to read the detail of your draft and your guide, but I have a simple question. Like I guess that you know that we have a draft of bidirectional SR path, and we are using the path segment to associate the forward direction and the reverse direction path into like how say bidirectional path, and we can make the both direction paths as like upside how say reverse all the C list like what you mentioned here. So I could like to know that what's the difference between that solution and this solution.
Right. Yeah. So that's a very good question. Yeah, that's a very good question. So basically, the difference is that this solution lets you support multiple segment lists. So it still uses this bidirectional association. If you look at the data model here, there's like some noise change. It still sends the bidirectional association A1 for candidate path 1 on H1 and the same bidirectional association A1 on candidate path 1 on E1, so that the two candidate paths are associated. But it's also necessary to link each segment list together with another segment list or with a set of other segment lists. So that association works at the level of the candidate path. But if you have a candidate path with multiple segment lists, then it doesn't seem to work that well, or it doesn't fully cover everything. But we can take that discussion offline as well. Next slide, please.
We can discuss this further. Yep.
Yeah. So here I'll just give an example of a path that has a forward path with two reverse paths, but the reverse paths, or the reverse path are not. So like the relationship is not mutual. So basically, like path 2 and 3 are opposite direction to path 1, but path 1 is not opposite direction to path 2 and 3. So if we look at this example, there's a head end on the left, and if you look at how the SR traffic with node CID of 4 would be sent, it would be sent on the green links. And the PC may give you the reverse paths as set of adjacency lists. For example, adjacency segment going from 4 towards 2 and then towards 1. And then another adjacent label stack going from 4 towards 3 towards 1. And so this is encoded as I've shown below. And basically, what's important is that it's not true that basically the green path is the reverse of the yellow path, for example, or the reverse of the blue path. But the yellow and the blue taken together are the reverse of the green. So basically, this encoding just allows you to have a very flexible way to encode like relationship between paths. If you want to, for example, send OAM packets that loop, that have a double stack of MPLS labels, like forward and reverse stack, you could use this much more efficiently, right? Because you could choose exactly which reverse path it's going to take, the head end can choose exactly which reverse path it's going to take. Next slide, please. So yeah, just requesting some feedback from the working group on this recent set of additions for the reverse path. And we need to request code point allocation so that we can start implementing.
Mike, one comment that I would have with my chair hat on would be, this is a pretty big change. So do discuss this on the working group list. Like, what is the requirement for this change? Get working groups feedback on this. I think it's okay to update the working group document and ask for slot, but like keep the mailing list engaged as well. So bring up this change on the mailing list specifically and ask for feedback of the working group.
Right, thanks. I'll do that.
And second, I think adding to what Cheng was saying, I think we need to have a section which clearly describe the relationship with SR bidirectional and have a clarity on how that extension gets used in which cases, and in case there is a multipath, how the two things will work with each other. And of course, you can imagine there could be error cases and others where you put some information in association and a little bit different information in your TLV. So how all that thing will work together. So a little bit more tightening is needed. And I see, I think some authors of SR bidirectional is also there. So I'm hoping that they will keep track of this work as well. So Boris, go ahead with your question.
Very short comment, Mike. Will be very helpful if implementation status will be added to the next version.
Yeah, we don't currently have an implementation status, but we will add it as soon as possible. And that's why IANA code points would also be very useful.
Rakesh?
Everyone, this is Rakesh from Cisco. So just to add to the previous comments in the SR bidirectional draft, we have added a new section that talks about the relationship with this draft that Mike is presenting, as well as I think there is explanation in the draft that Mike is presenting with some examples that also points back to the bidirectional, how it would work. So they both have some, I guess, sections about it. So please review the text and let us know the feedback.
Thanks, Rakesh. Cheng?
One is finished. I just want to get a feedback from the working group, and let's discuss further. Yep.
Thanks, Mike. There was also a point that that Ketan brought up in IDR working group just before this, where he was mentioning that some of these changes needs to be discussed in spring as well, and he brought up the issue actually related to backup segment list, and where he was saying that that's not a part of the SR policy architecture, and it's something that is missing. So we need to keep the track of that as well. I wanted to make sure that it's captured in our minutes so that we can track it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll sync up with Kate and yeah.
Loa?
So I haven't really carefully read Cheng's draft and Mike's draft together, but it seems like there is an opportunity to merge drafts here. Would that fly with the authors?
Like the SR bidir draft is more like associating, different candidate paths. But this draft is working within each candidate path to further kind of associate, segment lists.
I think that is fine. If that's the case, I think you should actually get some text about that in your draft, and they should get some in their draft.
Yeah, point taken. Yeah, I think that's kind of missing. Yeah, some linkage between them.
Rakesh, quickly.
see the need to merge them. They are quite different use cases, so they solve different problems. There is text for that in the BIDR draft. Please review and let us know your feedback. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also just like a 5-second comment. Like I keep this, or we keep this multipath draft as completely agnostic to any SR technology, right? So basically, it's kind of a generic PSAP extension that can be applied to other data planes.
Okay, Mike, let's move on to the next presentation, which is also by you.
Yep, hi again. So I'm Mike from Cisco. I'll be presenting PSAP extensions to support segment routing policy candidate paths on behalf of my co-authors. Next slide, please. So there are some like generic kind of tunnel mechanisms that were standardized as part of SR policy architecture draft. These include computation priority, explicit null label policy, drop upon invalid, and specified BSID only. The first two are kind of not really implemented that much, but we still need to standardize them in PSAP. And we want to make these mechanisms generic so that they're applicable for RSVPT tunnels or any other kind of tunnels in the future, because that's what they really are. They are generic. Next slide, please. So for the drop upon invalid, we propose this TLV called invalidation TLV, and basically it just has it lets the PCE to tell the PCC what to do if the path becomes invalid. So there's basically two options: either redirect the traffic towards IGP, which is the default, or drop the traffic when the LSP becomes invalid. And this TLV also has a state field, which kind of has similar value of 0 if it's not dropping and 1 if it is dropping traffic. So just a simple TLV to encode that. Next slide, please. And there's another functionality that was from the SR policy draft, where basically we don't want to bring up the LSP if the BSID is not available for programming. And so to cover this, we request a bit in the path binding TLV. And this bid will be per TLV or per BSID. And so if you have like multiple BSIDs for the same LSP, they can have different values of these bits. So you can say that some BSIDs are like mandatory and some BSIDs are not mandatory. So again, just a simple extension. Next slide, please. And I got this question from privately, and basically there's this current rules is that this SR policy candidate path ID TLV is mandatory in the PC initiate message. But if you think about it, it really doesn't have to be mandatory. PCE could omit it, and PCC could, just choose the values for it because it owns, kind of owns the policy, if you will. So we could make this TLV be optional in the PC init message. So if the PC does not know like all the values, it can just omit the TLV, or omit the TLV, and basically the PCC will fill whatever values it chooses. Next slide, please. So there's an implementation status of Cisco and Juniper. We both have proof of concepts with IANA code points. We had successful interop testing with between Cisco and Juniper at the ENTC event. Next step would be to get feedback on the new TLVs, and we want to request IANA code points for the additional TLVs. That's all. Thanks.
Hi, Boris. Go ahead.
Hi, Mike, again. One question and suggestions also. So question, if we will have a look to 7.4 item in the draft, PC initiated SR policy with multiple candidate paths. Item 1 sounds quite confusing because there is no clear differentiation. Like should PC send one PC initiate message or multiple? Maybe would be worth to add like more clearly, like may send or should send or whatever.
Yeah, so I believe there's each PC initiate message could contain multiple like LSPs, or they could arrive in different PC initiate messages. I think that the unit of signaling in PSAP is this PLSP, right? PLSP ID. So you could have multiple PLSP IDs in the same message, but that doesn't really give you anything except for save like 4 bytes of message header. Or you could send multiple PC init messages with each message containing only one PLSP ID.
Yep, okay, and a second comment regarding implementation status. We recently did some testing with our own controller prototype, and actually both you and I mean Cisco and Juniper, you currently support it in production version of software.
Yeah.
So it's not proof of concept anymore.
Yeah, that's correct. It's not a proof of concept. Right. Yeah, maybe we should just say that then. Yeah.
Okay, I have a few more questions, but I will send on the list. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, like we use this vendor TLV because right now there's
yeah,
not.
I know.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. That's what I mean by proof of concept. It's not.
One comment that I wanted to bring, like get the working group feedback on the generic mechanism. So right now, all these mechanisms, to make it generic, they are not part of the association object. They are carried outside it. But
Correct.
the main use cases for these is still SR policy. So now the issue comes in that the name of the document is SR policy, and we are keeping some generic mechanism. So it's okay to do it. There's not a hard and fast rule, but we want to make sure that we are doing the right thing and the working group is thinking about it. One option could be that we kind of highlight that though, this is still SR policy. The main use cases are coming from the SR policy architecture. The encoding is such that they are outside the association object. And maybe we add a paragraph which says that, oh, by the way, these can be used pretty easily for other non-SR policy cases, but the main use case is still SR policy. That's why they belong in this document, and we don't want to put them in a separate document. So some thinking I think authors should think so that point come across. And I wanted to get the working group feedback also, whether that's the right approach or not.
Yeah, thanks. Point taken. Yeah, like SR policy architecture was the first to kind of standardize these behaviors, right? But they, in fact, existed even before SR policy. So, so that was my reasoning of why I put them in this draft. But I'm definitely open to whatever people decide.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
So next we have Luke. Go ahead, Luke.
Hello, everyone. I'm Luke Fabrice D4 from MTN, and I'll be presenting an update on the support of the PAD-MTU in the PCE protocol on the behalf of my co-authors. So next slide, please. So it is good again to recall the motivation of this draft. You see, in the traditional MPLS, the part MTU could be signaled by RSVPT and LDP. But now when we come to the segment routing part, we had not yet had the additional signaling. So the SR tunnel cannot currently support the negotiation mechanism for part MTU. And when seats are pushed in a packet, the packet will be dropped or fragmented in forwards, and since the packet size might exceed the part MTU. So from the operator point of view, it is important that using list lines over multi-domains, the MTU should be lent and to avoid dropping packets. So this draft is to specify the extensions for the PSEP to carry the part MTU in the messages. Next slide, please. So in terms of history of the draft, the version 2 was presented in the IETF 108 and we received comments and suggestions. And these comments were being captured in the version 3, which were a terminology session that was added to clarify the confusing terms, the MTU, the link MTU, and the part MTU. A part MTU adjustment session, which was also added in the case of protection such as the TI LFA. And we did some editorial changes. Now this version 3 was presented in the IETF 109, which we received where we requested adoption. There were some comments that still came up that were captured in version 4, which were text that were added to clarify the relationship with the maximum seat depth, and text was added to support the multipath as specified in the draft IETF PCE multipath. So this version 5 that we have, we are saying part M2 is very, very important for network operators, and we once again request working group adoption of this draft. So thank you.
Thanks, Luke. Are there any questions for Luke? Thank you, Luke, for your presentation. Thanks for keeping the document up to date and handling all the comments. Thank you. And chairs will discuss and we'll look out for the wiki where we will update our adoption queue. Thank you. So let's move on to Julian. You want to jump in?
No, please go on. I was about to call for Giuseppe, but
Okay. Giuseppe, you are next. Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Yeah, this is an update about the PSEP extension to enable IFET. So next slide. Yeah, just a few words about background and motivation. IFET refers to all data plane on path telemetry, C2IM and alternate marking, and we also include the reference to the relevant documents for these methodologies. So the PSEP extension defines these documents allow to signal the IFET capabilities, and we address the initial comments, and the IFET attributes can be generalized and included as TLVs carried in the LSPA object, and so this generalized this application since it can be applied for all path types as long as, of course, they support the data plane telemetry method. Next slide. Yeah, the latest changes are mainly related to the application scenario. So according to RFC 8799 and also according to some discussions we had during the ISG evaluation of the, for example, of the alternate masking draft in IPv6 and also for in situ ORM, All these on-path telemetry technology, it is suggested that can be applied in a controlled domain. And according to this precondition, we also improve the security sections considerations to define that IFIT data must be propagated in a limited domain, also always for security, to address the security concerns. And this also is discussed in the relevant data plane document, and we also include some considerations in the PSEP extension in this document as well. So next slide. Yeah, this is just a recap about the what is the proposal of the draft. First, we define a new IFIT capability TLV that is an optional TLV to be used in the open object. There are 5 flags that we have defined. 4 are for IOM type enabled flag, so for IOM pre-allocated trace option, incremental trace option, and so on. And another flag is to enable alternate marking. Next slide. In addition, we define the IFIT attributes TLV that provides the configurable nodes of the features, and it can be included as optional in the LSTA object, as I mentioned before. Next slide. Yeah, in this slide, we can see the detail of the sub-TLVs for IOM. As I said, there are 4 options sub-TLV for IOM. Next. Yeah, and this is the sub-TLV for alternate marking. So next slide, I think this is the last. Yeah, regarding the discussion and next steps, we can say that IFIT methods are becoming mature also for SR MPLS and SRv6. And from this point of view, the TLVs here defined also complement the draft that was presented before by Mike on PCA segment routing policy CP to enable SR policy with the native IFIT. But in the end, this is general, so this can be applicable to all the path types when the data plane telemetry techniques has been defined. So we are also working on IPv6 data plane to define for example, the alternate marking for IPv6 data plane. Yeah, that's all. So we asked the working group to consider the adoption of this work. So welcome, question, comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Any questions for Giuseppe? Looking at the last minutes, there was one comment regarding the registry for flags. Did we take an action on it, or did we decide not to do it? Could you update on that?
No, I didn't take action, but yeah, to be honest, I forgot. But yeah, it's something that we can consider. Yeah.
Thank you.
No.
Any questions? Otherwise, we'll move to the last presentation for today. Okay, Waimo, go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Today, I'm going to talk about the PCE for path ingress protections. Next page. 2 ingress protection drafts have been merged into one as suggested. So this merged draft provide ingress protections of 2 types of path, SR path and the BATE path. In addition, this merged draft provide a foundation for protecting ingress nodes of different type of paths. Next page. Ingress protection capability sub-TLV is updated to include a new field, which is a path type indicators field. So this field is to indicate the type of passes whose ingress protection are supported. Flag S set to 1 indicates that the ingress protection of SR pass is supported. Flag B set to 1 indicates that the ingress protection of BATE pass is supported. Next page. Ingress protection sub-TLV is also updated to include the pass type indicator field. So this field is used to indicate the type of pass whose ingress is protected or is to be protected. So two flags are defined here. So one flag is S flag. S flag set 1 indicates that the ingress protection of SR pass is going to be provided. Flag B set 1 indicates that ingress protection of BATE pass. So next page. So what comes and will come. So in addition, we would like to request for working group adoptions. Thank you.
Any questions for Huaimo? Huaimo, thanks for first merging the two documents. But one query that I have is, first let me ask you this question: what happens to RSVPT? Is this not useful for RSVPT?
As I mentioned, as I said, this one can provide two type of pass protections: SR pass and BATE pass. So if we want to extend this one to provide protections for TE pass, I think it's easy. We just add one flag and then maybe include those TLVs for the TE pass.
So, Huaimo, what I was getting at is that I'm not able to understand why do we need to differentiate so much. Like we have path setup type. Path setup type will tell me whether it is an SR, SRv6, beer, whatever. The mechanisms would be anyway the same, irrespective of what is the path setup type. So I know from capability, it makes some sense that, oh, I want to have a separate flag for each of them so that I can identify the capability. But for rest of the procedure, what is the main point to have, to have different sections or different handling for each path setup type? I was thinking that this could be a common generic draft, and we don't have to talk too much about what happens for SR, what happens for BATE, what happens to RSVPT. The most of the PSEP encoding and PSEP procedure remains the same. So is that correct? Is my understanding for this correct?
Yes, you are correct. I'm also thinking about the one in that details. So because this is for backup pass, so for the backup pass, we can use backup pass type because when we initiate the pass, then there's some indications for that pass type, right? So that we have enough information for the pass type. And here, so we have explicitly indicate this type. I think maybe just give emphasize. So this one is okay, as you mentioned that we just because we already have those pass type informations, it's okay. It's okay with for that one, for the ingress protection sub-TLV, we can remove that pass type indicator. You're right, it's okay.
Thank you. Let's take the questions from the queue. Jeffrey? Jeffrey, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't see Jeffrey here.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. So sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, and I'd like to know if this draft has been discussed in Spring and the beer working group.
No, because this one is a extension for PCE.
In my opinion, I think that we should discuss the use case in a Spring and a beer working group at first. Thanks.
Thank you. Mike, quickly.
Couple of comments. Just to confirm, like this requires a connection to the CE, right? It requires PCE to talk to the CE device, right?
Not exactly.
Okay. Maybe just kind of elaborate, if you could elaborate on that, like in the draft. And it would be also good to know like which types of service overlay this will apply to, like L3 VPN. I assume it's not for L2 VPN. So
yes. I think yeah. In the draft, we mentioned that in some case we need communication with CE. Yes, you're right.
Okay, yeah. So also my second comment, just to mention different like overlay types that it applies to.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Very good comments. Huamo, please handle. There are some older comments as well on this document, so just please handle all the comments that you have received in the past when you have presented it. Thank you, everyone. Thanks. See you in the next session on Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Julian, any last
See you on
words?
Friday.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.